you have to know what are the measuring volumes. Because if you have a measuring volume corresponding to the papilla of the skin, you're fine. If you have a measuring volume including the thermoregulatory part of the skin, you don't have much use of that parameter. What kind of technologies have been used over the last 40 years, 50 years? I will skip through it easily. Pulse volume recordings have limited or no value. Transcutaneous oximetry was used and was very popular, especially in pediatrics, some 20 years back, but it's not a very useful technique, and especially in adults. Laser Doppler came 40 years back to quantify skin circulation, and it is amazing to see that even today, PubMed show that 16,000 papers are published on skin measurements with this technique. And to be a bit blunt, I think that 15,000 of those papers should never have been written, because people didn't understand what kind of perfusion we were measuring. Because the measuring volume is in this size, and that corresponds to both nutritional perfusion and thermoregulatory perfusion. So you don't know what part of the signal is giving information about nutrition. OPS, or side-stream dark field microscopy, is interesting techniques. I don't have time to go into those techniques, but they have published a lot of papers over the last 10 years, and it's valuable techniques. But when we test out in what is the sensitivity of different techniques here for discovering tissue hypoxia or ischemia, and this is a study we did in Boston way back, and pulse volume recordings are pretty sensitive for small stenosis and degrees of ischemia, but it's not useful in really ischemic tissue. Laser Doppler is not sensitive at all for changes in the first part of developing of ischemia. It may be valuable in the last part of severe ischemia, but the measuring volume is the problem. And the transcutaneous oximetry has no sensitivity in ischemic tissue. What about near-infrared spectroscopy? Probably a lot of you have used it to assess cerebral oxygenation. And it was very optimistic reports when this technique came 15 years back. The problem here is that the measuring volume is in this size. So when you have a 2 or 3 cubic centimeter recording volume, it means that this volume will contain arterioles, capillaries, venules. And you do not know the values. Is it stemming from the venous side or from the arterial side? So it's a mixture of saturations, and you get an average, and it actually doesn't help you that much. It is valuable, for instance, in my field, when we replace ascending aorta and go into circulatory arrest. But the absolute values are of very little importance, but it's a trend. You can follow a continuous trend while you are in circulatory arrest. But the limiting factor is the large volumes. So that's the background that I studied for many years, and then I came up and understood that we have to think a bit outside the boxes. So I started investigating a combination of two technologies. One is a microscope, a white light microscope, and look here, the measuring volume is 0.1 cubic millimeter, meaning that the near infrared has 1,000,000 times larger measuring volume. And in these small volumes, we do not have arterioles or venules. We have only capillaries. And we touched upon diffuse reflectance spectroscopy yesterday. And I'll come back a little more to this technique. And again, it's very, very small measuring volume and high resolution. What we did was to combine these two devices into what we call MLab. MLab is a mobile microvascular laboratory for bedside use. We have had several prototypes, but now we are going for a handheld 4 kilos device. And when we do record data with the microscope and the spectroscope, those data may be transferred via cloud to a central analyzing lab. So whether the patient is in China or South America or Oslo, doesn't matter. We can do the analysis in our central lab with specially designed software. So if you put a microscope on the skin, at this kind of microscope, you will see some red dots. And those red dots is the tipping point of the nutritive capillaries in the papilla of the skin. We do not see anything that is deeper down. And we look only at nutritive capillaries regulated by local parasite activity. And then, if we have this picture, we can calculate diffusion distances for oxygen molecules, and we can look at the distribution of the capillaries within a field. So we use 5 films, and we use 12 spectra. So the principle behind diffuse reflectance spectroscopy is that you put white light into the skin, part of the light is absorbed, and part of the light is re-admitted out of the skin, reflected out of the skin. So this is what we get out of the skin, and this is composed of the fingerprint spectrum of oxyhemoglobin and deoxyhemoglobin, and by advanced algorithms we can then calculate what is the percentage saturation of erythrocytes in a tissue volume of 0.1 cubic millimeter, meaning inside capillaries. So the Odin concept consists of output parameters where we calculate functional capillary density, meaning perfused capillaries, the heterogeneity of distribution among 5 films of 20 seconds. We can calculate capillary flow velocity in individual capillaries and also look at the degree of regulation. So these 4 parameters is in essence parameters showing the function of the regulatory system, meaning the parasites. Are they optimally functioning, or are the function really stretched, or does it still work? The bottom line information is given here. What is the microvascular oxygen saturation? What did we really suck out of oxygen molecules from the capillaries? So to show you some examples. So this is a patient. I think you may, I tried, yeah, right. So this is a patient being admitted at Adelaide, Australia for acute pancreatitis. And this is the kind of information we get to the lab in Oslo. So first part is a bit blurry, but the second part where we have done image enhancement is looking like this. And here you see the top of these nutritive capillaries in the papilla. They are nutritive capillaries. You can use the skin, and we can characterize velocities of erythrocytes, the density of the loops, and we can also characterize what is the average saturation of oxygen in these capillaries. Another kind of software we have developed is this one, because to manually annotate the density of loops is enormous job. So personally, with a PhD student, we looked in an ECMO study of 30,000 capillaries to annotate them, and it's a terrible job. But the IT guys and the software guys, they created algorithms now based on AI. So what we see here is the green ones are the ones we annotated manually, and then the software guys, they developed this algorithm, discovering these loops automatically. The embarrassing thing here is in this one, because I was tired and I didn't see it, but the algorithm sees it. So that is the beauty of AI. And the other interesting thing is this one, because here the algorithm don't see the capillary, but I saw it. Now the algorithm sees it. So it sees it only when it is perfused during the 20-second film. What about proof of concept? Does this work in practice? So I will put a little efforts into ECMO and then talk about what is the sensitivity of this system for detecting hypoxia. And maybe we'll have a little chance to mention SIRS and sepsis. So we went through this yesterday about the terrible results of ECMO. We can't continue like that. We can't spend resources when we have 17% survival after 1 year or half a year. We have to do it better. So this is an example with the first kind of microscope we used. We put on the skin, and you see these commas or small commas, and this is what it looks like in a healthy control or an ECMO survivor on the dorsum of the skin. The one to the left here was a shocking experience to me. It was a patient that was operated, couldn't come off bypass, and the surgeon said, put the patient on ECMO. When we were back at ICU, it's the first patient I put the microscope on the skin. And what do you think here? No capillaries. This is dead skin. This patient doesn't have a chance of surviving. And the only thing we see is bleeding capillaries. They have bled, but they are not perfused anymore. This patient cannot survive. And I, at that time, decided that I will not take part in decision making. And this patient lived for 7 days. Then every kind of physiological regulation went bananas. And my colleague, surgical colleague, said, "Oh, this intensivist and anesthetist, they have put tubes and infected the patient. This is septicemia." It's not septicemia. It's a part of the process of dying. It's decomposition of cells that had not been perfused for a week. This to the right is the second patient I looked upon on ECMO. And here we can see some kind of capillaries, but velocity in those capillaries were 0. No oxygen delivery. This patient will die. I was sure. It took 1 week, a lot of resources before the patient died of what the surgeons believed was septicemia. So that was what I had when I went to Cleveland and Massachusetts General in Boston and proposed a larger study. And this is one example of a patient that was surviving. And to me, this looks like a beautifully perfused capillary bed. densities are fine, velocities are fine, and the oxygen saturation is fine. This is a long-term survivor on ECMO. This is a second patient that was a male of 22 years, had heart arrest outside hospital, and had been compressed for 120 minutes. We should never have put him on ECMO when he arrived in the hospital, but it was a really fit guy of 22 years. So then your emotions just push you and you are starting. This is the film. Do you think this patient survived? No. So happily we stopped his ECMO after 2 days. But still we had used blood donations from something like 50 patients in the blood bank and so on. It was a terrible situation. The young guy looks healthy, but he is irreversibly damaged in his microcirculation. So this was an early interim analysis of the pro-ECMO result, but I showed it because we can see that densities are lower in the ones dying on ECMO as compared to the survivors, the healthy controls and the survivors. When it comes to capillary flow velocities, physiology regulates the optimal flow in healthy capillaries. The ones dying has a left shift, so a big percentage had hardly any perfusion at all, while the survivors had a certain right shift. And the bottom line of all information is the microvascular oxygen saturation. These guys dying extract 70% of oxygen molecules offered to the microvascular bed, while the healthy controls and the survivors, they extract only 50%. So that is a good prognostic sign. These are the present results from the pro-ECMO that we are publishing and writing up now. And the thing here is that healthy controls are in the same range, average extraction of 45% of oxygen molecules, very similar to heart sick patients being admitted for elective uncomplicated cardiac surgery. So they are very similar to the healthy controls, and these are the long-term survivors. Those ones here, they die, or during ECMO, or shortly after ECMO. And interesting, these few died, but they did not die because of the problem with peripheral microcirculation. They died because of arrest and cerebral edema and herniation. So what about chronic heart failure? And the same happens is that we have an average extraction of 45% of oxygen molecules in healthy controls. The ones with heart failure, they extract more. They have lower measurements of microvascular oxygen saturation, and the heterogeneity among 12 different recording volumes is higher, meaning that the parasite activity is struggling. It's stretched, but can maintain life, but it's a struggle. So what about other tests of this system? We did one study on asphyxiated newborns, and they go through 72 hours of hypothermic period being intubated. And the reason for hypothermia is that it reduces the oxygen demand in the circulation or in the body. And our hypothesis is that the Odin technologies could detect what kind of mechanisms do the body use, the physiology use, to deliver less oxygen, 25 to 30% less. And the bottom line here is that it's velocities. It's fewer erythrocytes passing through the capillaries. The white bars represents a left shift of what we recorded during hypothermia. So during hypothermia, we deliver less oxygen, and shows that this concept can show what kind of mechanism do the physiology use during hypothermia. Another interesting example is that this device can be mounted on a slit lamp in an ophthalmology department. And the interesting thing we knew in beforehand, that cornea is a non-perfused tissue. The less than 1 millimeter encircling cornea we are almost there. The 1 millimeter, less than 1 millimeter, have a lot of stem cells. And that is a circular ring around cornea, producing new corneal cells. Because each time we are blinking, we are tearing off corneal cells that are replaced from the limbus area. So we hypothesize that it is a higher metabolic rate in cornea, in limbus, as compared to the rest of conjunctiva. And that turned out to be the case. So these are examples, cornea here, limbus here, and this is the rest of conjunctiva. And we can see that how do the body regulate and optimize oxygen delivery. In limbus, they have a higher density of capillaries, and they have a higher extraction of oxygen molecules, showing that it is a higher metabolic rate. This is what the ophthalmologist had said to me in before, and but it must be like that, but it had never been shown before. And for me, it was an example of this technology can quantify what could be expected, and it makes sense. COVID management, I touched upon that yesterday. A study from Massachusetts General where we included 40 patients and 10 controls. We had some early discharge patients with less severe COVID and others with long stay in the hospital. And we had 5 fatalities. And this is, in a way, if you should remember anything from this lecture, that in the DRS, diffuse reflectance spectroscopy, made measurements on the hand, not disturbing intensive care personnel. You just say, can I please just borrow the hand? You go on with what you're doing. And then we could show, again, as we've seen in many cases, that healthy controls, they have a measurement of near to 60%, meaning that they extract approximately 40% of oxygen molecules delivered into the microvascular bed. And I must stress the excellent lung treatment given to the COVID patients, because the arterial saturation was approximately similar in all the COVID patients as to the health controls. So they handled the lung problem very well. But we can see that the ones dying from COVID, they extract 80% of oxygen molecules delivered to the microvascular bed in the papilla of the skin. It's a very, very serious prognostic finding. And the ones that survived are in this region in the intermediate thing. So we touch briefly on this slide, and this is my almost last slide. And when an oxygen molecule is going to go and pass the capillary wall, it is a driving force making the oxygen molecule to pass the capillary endothelium and the basement membrane. And this membrane is a semi-permeable membrane. And we do measure the oxygen saturation inside the capillary, but we can calculate the partial pressure of the oxygen molecules inside the capillary. So this one is calculated, and since we know that in the ones dying, we extract 80% of all oxygen molecules, the tissues have to be severely hypoxic. And I think that explains the common mechanism for all long COVID patients. Long COVID may be reversible, and that means that that cells in the tissues have had lack of oxygen supply, and they try to save metabolic rate. They hibernate. And if this disease goes over, then they have access to oxygen again, and they resume activity. But if this tissue hypoxia was so severe that cells didn't survive on hibernation but died, then long COVID symptoms are permanent. I couldn't resist. We talked about septicemia yesterday. This is just one kind of application. It's on the skin of a pig infected with meningitis bacteria. And I mean, I was really thrilled when I saw this picture. So this is a bleeding capillary. And I guess that will come 3, 4, 5 hours before you can see petechia on the skin of infected children. So it's an early warning possibility. And we could think that during epidemics of meningitis, the doctors could have a small microscope and say, I don't find anything. It's fine in the ears, the throat, the lungs are fine. But I will just take a look at the skin. And you see one bleeding capillary, and then survival will increase from 20 to 80% probably, because you start much earlier with adequate therapy. So summary of my lectures is that we have created what we call an ODI technology platform. It can be used on a lot of cases and indications in medicine. And we have shown that Odin microscopy can quantify microvascular function, meaning parasite regulation. Is it working, or is it not working, or is it overstretched? ODI measures capillary oxygen extraction and indirectly assess the tissue PO2 availability. And Odin can be used for early warning, septicemia, for instance. Odin can be used for triage. How sick are you when you are entering the emergency room? And that has enormous impacts on health economics, because at one stage in MGH, they had 300 patients coming to the emergency room every day and said that I feel bad. And they knew they had 30 respirators, they had 30 ordinary hospital beds, and had to send home the rest of the population. So 260 people had to go home again. So we can use this as a triage system, and it has huge implications for health economy, and it can give prognostic information and assess effect of treatment by measuring before and after starting a treatment. So if any, I know that this presentation is not a lot of new stuff. This is a textbook that was edited at Cleveland Clinic and published half a year ago. I've written a chapter on microcirculation and microvascular monitoring. So if any of you would like to have this in a written form, they can write me a mail to this mail address, and I will send you this electronic version of my chapter in this book. Thank you.
Thank you, and people for questions. Thank you so much. Absolutely fascinating about where we're going. Any questions? One up here at the front.
Thank you, very interesting. Do you see this as mostly a prognostic and early warning system. It can tell you that something is wrong with the patient, or this patient has a very bad prognosis, but not really lead you into the cause of it or what to treat. Then I understand you right, yeah?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
And also, have you tested this against other non-specific parameters like lactate or central venous saturation? Do they correspond, or is this a much earlier sign?
The situation is that we are in a continuous process. I've worked with this activity for the last 10 years as my main activity, and we have done a lot of clinical and animal experimental studies, and we don't have time to go into the details here. But I think that the importance of my presentation is that it is a new way of thinking. It's a new technology platform. The guys at Harvard in Boston, they say to me that, Knut, it's 100 years since Röntgen discovered the X-ray. It's 50 years since we had ultrasound imaging, and now you have created the new ultrasound. Well, so the reason for me being here is that I hope that some young guys and ladies around here will see the potentials here. And I'm positively sure that when I'm not longer present on this planet, then it will still be a phase of development. So it's a lot of possibilities for doing clinical research now on this kind of approach. It's a technology platform, can be used for a lot of different purposes. And just call me or send me a mail, and I will try to see if it's 1 or 3 persons in this audience that would like to try to use this technology for their future clinical research. I'm really happy.
Thank you so very much. That was absolutely fascinating. Thank you. Now, as we slowly move in towards a bit of a trailer for the next few sessions about trauma, I sort of realised that life is all about perspectives and stuff. And this morning I may have done you a disservice by saying that those going for a run at 6 o'clock in the morning were crazy. Because actually, in perspective, the next talker, next speaker, he's a whole bunch of crazy. So this is a Pararescue jumpers. This is something I would never do. I'm not a brave person, and this is, I mean, the stuff these guys do is ridiculous, but incredibly effective and incredibly brave. So Spencer is from the 130th Pararescue Squadron, based out of California, and he's also a specialist, special operator medic. And he's going to tell you a little bit about their capabilities, and this is going to act as a little bit of a trail for what we're going to speak about after the break with Colonel Shackelford from the US as well. But let me hand you over to Spence.
So yeah, good morning everyone. Spencer, pararescueman, so we're the rescue specialists of the DoD, and then critical care medics for special operations. I think it's important that we are here to kind of represent and then get with you guys in the mere fact of like showing all the hard work that you guys put into medicine just to strictly save lives trickles down to what we're doing on the front lines. And we kind of want to give like an appreciation video showing us like our capabilities and what we're doing through all the hard work that you guys have done, countless hours in the ER and everything, to kind of help pave the way for us medicine cowboys to do it right out there. But yeah, so this is kind of our capabilities, what we do, how we get to our patients, and then we'll kind of talk about a recent patient that we had, and then discuss and go from there.
Mayday, mayday! We need help, and we see flares! Mayday, mayday!
Vessel Concourse, Vessel Sector Southeast.
Anybody hear me? Can anybody hear me? Mayday, but we are about to lose 5 lives. If you don't respond to me, answer me, or do something.
I think the 131st is a really good representation of the struggle that is this career.
We're in. 10 minutes north. 146. 47 degrees.
from San Francisco. Matt, you mentioned the Diamond Princess cruise ship. We saw how quickly the virus spread.
It's like the manifestation of all of the struggle and the currents that come with trying to be a PJ and trying to balance your family, but you love the job so much that you're still going to fight and make that happen. You're passionate about this job because we actually do it.
We just mentioned it, but this morning cities across the Southland are under curfew.
Oh, shit.
Protesters clashed with police.
You can see some of the National Guard members that are out here this morning keeping watch, making sure that everything is peaceful.
The skyline of San Francisco looking more like an image from Mars. The orange glow from wildfires burning miles away, shrouding the city's landmarks, the smoke blocking out the sun.
But what I think makes a good PJ, how you can process all of the stuff that we have to do, stay level-headed, and get the job done without a roadmap, because our job at time, you have to figure things out, and you don't get to decide the parameters you work in ever in this job.
The culture of Moffitt, I think, has always been never taking no as an answer. Get it done.
I'd say what makes Moffitt unique is really the team dynamic we have here. I don't think there's anywhere better to work. The group of guys that we have, like every day, it's fun coming into work and being a part of this team and what we do. So I'd say it's a team and everyone around us.
Once you're a part of Moffitt, you're here for a while. You don't bounce around. The team camaraderie, how we look out for each other, how we grow as people and individuals together throughout the
a hoo-yah video for us, but just to show our appreciation to you guys, right? So this is how we get to the patient, everything that you guys just saw. This is one of our jump missions that just recently happened, 2022, for a call came in, septic patient, kind of going off of a lecture from yesterday. We may have broken quite a few of the rules that was established yesterday with the lecture on sepsis, but the patient survived. So we can kind of go through it. Next slide. This is the insertion. You guys might saw in the video. How they got to the patient. Grabs the just in the back. Safe. On our part. Why everything looks so big is we have to fit all this awesome gear that you guys see in the back. We have to fit that to make sure we're getting the correct patient care to these guys. But so this was the mission drop. Essentially, this is what we were dealing with. It doesn't really come clear over comms or what we got to do. We took this picture on scene. We didn't get this picture over live feed. This is a picture from our guys. So again, yeah, next slide. Or go back, excuse me. But this was our team complement. This is kind of like when we started, so 0700 when we launched and when we got to our patient. So critical time management was essential in this case, because as you guys could see, right, that patient's condition was not good. Kind of another view of it. This is what we had to deal with, though, jumping in, terrible sea state. The crew that picked us up wasn't doing too well, as you can tell. This is all GoPro. We're not just like taking selfies, you know, like super stoked. But had to deal with this, getting up, getting contact with the patient. Next slide. We finally make entry, and then this is what we have. So we ran through our cellulitis protocol, so just like a sepsis protocol. Next slide. The biggest thing for us was, so pre-hospital setting turned into a hospital. So we didn't have the luxury of getting that patient straight to you guys. We had to kind of makeshift what the arena that we were given and make this place super clean and make like his situation better. So this was like the betadine that we had. And then our guys from communication with docs, you know, decided to do some debriefment, running through our sepsis protocol, and inevitably saving this guy's life and keeping this guy's leg. This was our pain management. If you guys, you know, after the thing that we gave yesterday, I mean, we kept it pretty basic. You know, off of Sarah's lecture, you know, basic is key in all this. And I mean, we didn't go anything crazy. And inevitably, this was everything that, you know, 9 hours total, This is the amount of meds that we gave. The conclusion was positive. Guy kept his leg. Guy didn't die. You know, the others may live. This is our total medication, which isn't that crazy, especially talking with Zermatt, the amount of ketamine that they give. It's pretty the party bus out here. You know, this was perfectly fine for what he had. And then, you know, our guys literally surgically removed all that dead skin. And then this is the patient right here. You know, he's looking pretty dang good for what he was. He has to go on a helicopter ride real quick. And then this was the hospital treatment. And then one more slide, another slide, and then this is where he's at now. So he's doing good, has full function of everything. But this is all an attest to, you know, the findings that you guys do. And, you know, the hours that you guys slave over to kind of trickle down to the pre-hospital setting and then letting us go have fun and then representing you guys hopefully in the best way that we can. But yeah, we appreciate it, and yeah, hopefully we see you guys in another year. So yeah, thank you.
Can I just say, Spencer, you're incredibly humble. You're incredibly humble. I think that's probably the mark of someone that does some incredible stuff. I don't think any of that is simple. I think what you've done is incredibly complicated there, and you've done it incredibly well. That patient owes his life to you guys. Any questions?
Thank you very much for the impressive pictures and talk. Just one small question. So in your time schedule, I saw 7:30, you ordered 2 times Rambo. What does it mean?
Okay, so a Rambo, yeah, Sylvester Stallone times 2. No, but a Rambo is like the boat that you saw. I don't know if you got to see it actually, but it's a package boat that we throw out. I don't know if we can find it, but so 2 times is just 2 package boats that we throw at the back of the C-130, and then we chase after it. You know, we didn't have the luxury of that. It's this thing right here. I don't know if they're gonna get to come on the screen, but it's just a big package boat coming out the backside. That's a Rambo. So we throw that bad boy out, make sure everything's good, and then we just chase after it. And that's kind of like our infill platform. Yeah. Yeah. Keep it professional and classy as always. So, but yeah, we appreciate everything though. Thank you guys. Thank you.
Very much. So just before the break, we've got a short presentation from Michael Heller. He's the Vice President of Corpulse. He's going to tell you a little bit about their kit. And then after that, we've got a break, and we'd like you here to start sharp at 10 o'clock, because we've got a fantastic session for you after the break. But I'll hand you over to Michael.
Yeah, so thank you very much. I was not aware that we get this awesome presentation about chasing Rambos out of an airplane. So I simply followed the protocol and thought we were next after Dr. K. So now I understand why I was asked to speak a little bit quicker, so to not hold you up to get coffee and skiing organized. So yeah, thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to present here again. For me, I think it's the 4th Big Sick. So the last times I think we started off with presenting data from our animal model about perfusion and mechanical CPR, and then I think we did synchronized therapy with mechanical CPR and the defibrillator, and I think last year we had a presentation here where we were talking to you about 22 lead ECG. Interesting side fact, that presentation that I put together last year here was comparing the Matterhorn to a heart muscle. And so many people liked the presentation that we were asked throughout the year at different conferences to present. And then one time somebody came up and said, like, why do you use a mountain? And I said, because it was initially for the Big Sick conference where everybody and everything is about that one mountain. So today I will show you a quick presentation about data in emergency medicine. And I think it's quite suitable to do that today, to do that right now, because in pretty much every presentation leading up, I've heard something either about AI or some sort of machine or deep learning. And that's definitely something that we will see heaps of in the future in EMS. You guys have seen it. You guys heard just before that physicians might get tired, things will be overlooked. We heard yesterday that there's a certain rescue organization here that prefers to intubate in flight because there's no wind there, it's warmer, and so on. So those algorithms will have a massive effect on what we do, and this is because data is everywhere. Last week, for example, I was attending a German think tank event in northern Germany, and we sponsor a young investigator award there, and I learned that you can actually correlate out-of-hospital cardiac arrest outcome to temperature, and this is what's coming towards us. There's going to be a lot of data available. We all know the data that comes out of our machines. We had questions before, what we use for early onset diagnosis, which parameter, which magic number. We've heard all about that. We all know which measurements we can get from a modern machine, but there's a lot more data around that adding to this. And this is definitely not something that we are driving. So we're saving lives, we're chasing Rambos out of airplanes, we're doing all this fancy stuff, but there's other organizations out there that are crazy about data, and those guys develop databases, develop procedures, algorithms that are sometimes a little bit hard to follow. Most of our data sets for them, for example, are not interesting, but I think I saw Oliver in the back there on his MacBook. If he starts now joining a Facebook group about modern red Ferraris, and then he starts Googling how much they cost and how quick he can drive it up from Tesh to Zermatt, all of a sudden his data set becomes interesting. And then when he opens a newspaper, there will be advertisement for small red cars. But if that wasn't a small red car, if we transfer that into our world, it might not be Oliver, it might be the next patient, and that small red car might be something else red, might be a blood product that this patient's in desperate need of, and because it's cold, because it's windy, because we can't concentrate, because we're tired, or it's just that early that we can't see it yet in the patient, the data might already point us into that way that this patient might be in need of a blood product very, very soon, maybe already during transport, and we might even have to alter our destination and so on, but you know everything about that. But the question is here, what do we do with our data today? And bit of a sad thing, but the most questions we get is, how can I delete it? Because devices, there's laughter here. Yeah, that's exactly it. I would like to do that, but it's our customers, and it's not always appropriate to laugh at questions. But this is really it. People get the alarm that the internal memory is 80% full, and then they start calling their medical device experts like, how do I delete this? I want this alarm to go away. And that's then the job, it's then our job, and that's what we want to advocate for. Keep that data, because data is what will help you in the future to have this help, to process it, to identify things. This data from your patients is extremely important to develop future algorithms. There's a couple of things, I'll skip that one here, to point out. It's important that you gather as much data as you can. You can get data from like all different sorts of machines. Every modern electrical medical device will create some sort of data, store that somehow, and then it's important that it ends up in some sort of database. A database is not quite like an external hard drive. On an external hard drive, you might have found that out if you stored your pictures for a decade on that. It's really hard to find something, but as soon as you put something into a database, it's very easy to find things again, and then you have the possibility to export it. And then I split that up here into basically two paths. One path is to use a tool to review your data. I'll have 2 slides on that, on how that may look like. But if you have your data in your database, you can process it and you can export it. And the majority of your data you can export down to a level that you have comma-separated values, which is basically the very low basis. And then you can export it into any tool that you're comfortable with, that your organization is comfortable with, or for example, a university that you do research with. There's a couple of short-term effects as well. So you're not just chasing a dream that in 10 years algorithm, or in 20 years an algorithm will let you know when your patient might need to go to a different hospital or that you might have overlooked something. So there's also the possibilities to use that data right away. I mentioned debriefing, I mentioned searching. Just imagine an organization has a couple of hundred or even 1,000 ambulances. You can find your missions really quickly. Quality is something that becomes more of an interest in emergency medicine as well. So it's not just something that we see in the industry, but that actually emergency medical services do assess their quality, create reports, and show that either like to the governing body or even the public. And especially to an audience like here in the room, if you have data, you can use that for research. And we've seen fantastic presentations here. The reaction about like laughing about deleting data, I think, is something that is a pain in every researcher's thought. If the data is gone, if you can't have it accessible, if data has been overwritten or put on a USB stick and that got lost. So if you have data, this is your key to research, and it doesn't necessarily have to look boring. I just put this picture in here to show that doesn't have to happen in front of a super big computer. This is nowadays all cloud-based. You can access that from where you want. You have access to your data from wherever. You can show it to people. This is a debriefing solution here as an example. This is that blown up a little bit. So this is basically what we've always had in entertainment technology. This is a recording of a mission. So it says up top their mission history. So this is a mission from May in 2022, and you basically can go back and forth. Obviously, that's a cardiac arrest, so you can click on those buttons and you jump right there. Why I chose this slide, this is very important. If you gather data, it's the timestamp. So you see that red line here in the middle, so it's obviously like 16:33 and 32 point some seconds. So what that allows us is to see up there, obviously, a patient in VF. We have the ECG trace there, we have the pleth there. We see where we are, it's just after the exhalation phase. And then at the bottom, for example, we see a mechanical CPR device. But we see everything of that with the same timestamp. That's the advantage if you put your data together, if you synchronize it, if you put it into one database, so you don't have to match that up. So here we see at exactly this second that the patient had an end-tidal CO2 of 22. We see that the mechanical chest compression device was compressing 5.5 centimeters deep, needed 385 Newton to get there, and so on. And we see that there was, for example, a peripheral pulse of 80 with a perfusion index of 1.1. That's probably a patient that would qualify, and Damago is looking into the direction. You would want to put your ultrasound probe on that and would want to see what the heart muscle's actually doing. And prepare him for ECMO, sure. Yeah, just more specific, and I will go over that quickly. Of course, if that was a cardiac arrest patient and you have data, you can have that, for example, displayed in all different forms. We see here, this is obviously manual chest compression. We see the different phases here. We see the defibrillations. Software like this can make it a bit easier for you and actually give you results on your chest compression performance and so on. And then everything, of course, always like important with a timestamp. And then, for example, quite nice here, we see this is manual, and then we have a mechanical device here, and it becomes a little bit more linear. We also see the rate fluctuating here. So this is an example on if you have data available, how you could use that, for example, in a debriefing scenario. This is that short-term effect, not just chasing the dream, if you build a database over years. Same thing, of course, also for STEMIs. If you want to review something like that, you have your data. If you upload it, in this case, you have it in a raw format so that you can actually use it for training and all of those things as well. To begin with, it might not look extremely sexy if you put it into a database. This is a screenshot that I made from the database, not something that people would thrive to have and print out and put on the wall to look at. But if you have it in a database, you can create things like this. This is again a screenshot from a research database we use. I think it's got a couple million of data sets in it. And then when you do certain extractions, we can probably find that there's like 12,000 cases that had a defibrillation. And then it basically comes down to what we want to know. one of our senior data engineers asked me once, it's like, it's not about what we can produce as data for you. You have to create the question. The data's there. We have all the information. The difficult task is to come up with a question, formulate that, and then if you have it in a high-performance database like this year, within seconds you can run your questions over millions of data sets and display them in whichever format you want. And then maybe one day in the future we can use something like this to either present what we have, answer the question somebody might have, or prepare our data to be put into an algorithm that helps us treating patients. 11 minutes. I speed it up.
Michael will be at the stand for any questions and stuff, but I'll let you guys go get some coffee. And if you come back for 10 o'clock to start.